I'm a marriage and family therapist. I specialize in trauma and couples. I work with a lot of people who have early attachment wounds and seeing how it shows up in their relationships as adults. So I work around parenting, around couples who are deciding, are we staying together?
All righty, good evening, everyone. My name is Kevin. I am one of the co-hosts here at the One Moment Podcast. Got a very distinguished and honorable guest today on our show. But before we get started, before we jump into today's episode, I wanted to open us up with when we think about what's going on around the world, what's going on in the United States, when we think about the what's happening with immigrants, politics aside, okay, there's a organization that I think deserves some respect because they fight for human rights. Um, and this is the Coalition for Humane Immigrant Rights of Los Angeles. Again, politics aside, we don't take sides on politics, on who's right, who's wrong, but we do debate the welfare and the rights of all people, regardless of. So if you have a opportunity, please check them out. Make some donations. People are suffering, and especially when we get into today's episode with our distinguished guest, who was a licensed family and marriage therapist, and who's also a trauma specialist. Uh, when we look at what's going on, there's a lot of trauma that's going on, right? It's up underneath the scenes that we might not see, you know. So again, definitely check them out. Coalition for Humane Immigrant Rights of Los Angeles County. Their website is CHIRLA.org. If you can donate $2, do it. If you can donate $5, do it. If you can donate $100, do it. Whatever you can do to donate, do it. Of course, you can support us too. We do take donations, but we do not require it to listen to our shows, to watch our shows. We are across multiple platforms. I think when we last counted, it was like 17 different platforms. So yes, and at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Ruben Burney and let him do some intros on our guest.
Well, my name is Ruben Burney. Uh, I say first of all, I'm a husband of 45 years, a grandfather, a great grandfather, and what I do for a living or career that I enjoy doing, I have over 25 plus years experience, is a certified alcohol and drug counselor, and uh, being in that field has allowed me to do other things like also, I'm certified, well, I'm approved by the Department of Transportation, what they call a SAP, and that's a substance abuse professional. So if someone who works for the DOT, for example, uh, if there's suspicion of drug use or they test positive, for example, on a drug screen, a random, then it would go to a person like me, and I would actually do an assessment. And it's unethical for me to do the assessment and the treatment. So I then would refer them to treatment and then follow up with them. So, and then I do, I'm contracted for the North Carolina Department of Motor Vehicle to do uh, C, uh, a CCA, which is a clinical assessment for a person who wants to get their license back. And lastly, I'm a DWI provider. I do assessments and provide treatment for those in North Carolina who gets a DWI. So I try to be well rounded. At 69, I still want to learn and grow. That's why I'm doing this podcast to learn and grow from our special guest. For example, her name is Lyn Martin. She's a family therapist and a trauma specialist, and she can go further and tell us about herself.
Thank you for having me. I'm a marriage and family therapist. I specialize in trauma and couples. So I work with a lot of people who have early attachment wounds and seeing how it shows up in their relationships as adults. Even though we pretend like all that's in the past, it always kind of finds a way of crawling back in. So I work around parenting, around couples who are deciding, are we staying together, are we splitting, right? It's kind of been too much. So I really love this work. I'm also a mom of 3 girls, and I got 2 pups and a cat that may or may not make an appearance at some point today. And yeah, I'm originally from California, so kind of thinking a lot about uh, all of the things about California. And now I live in New Jersey, so I've got kind of the experience of the 2 different coasts, which has been interesting.
Wow, I did not know that you were from California. That is one thing I
Yeah.
don't think the bio picked up on, at least the ones that I was reading, anyways. I don't know, maybe I overlooked it. Apologies if I did. But no, that's just been something that has been on my mind. I worked in immigration, and so when I saw that, when we were reading over your bio, um, saw that you were a family therapist, part of what I guess is where my family uh, um, professionalism or whatever had kind of started rebuilding there a little bit. Because here's the deal, right? And I told you I had a joke for you. I always tell people, and all of my colleagues, everybody knows me, knows I'm not a family therapist. I'm not, right? And I remember taking that course, and because K-Crep says you have to do, you know, one course in career, one in family, one in all this other stuff, right? So I'm reading the book, and I'm like, and you're talking about Mnuchin and this person and that person. Like I got vague memories of. I got about 3 chapters in, and it was so dry to me. Okay, I threw the book away, and I ain't picked up the book since. I don't even know where the book is. But I say that respectfully because now I work a lot with families, uh, whether it's uncle, aunt, cousin, brother, sister, mom, dad, children, uh, and part of mental health touches on that. Part of immigration, when I worked in immigration, uh, my what I had to learn was more than just the individual. I had to learn about cultural impacts, family impacts, traumatic impacts, right? Had to learn a lot of those things. And so I see what's going on, regardless of politics aside. There's a lot of trauma that's being created as we speak, that's occurring as we speak. And my heart breaks. And this is our platform to help fight for help, to get help, help fight for change.
Yeah. Yeah, when I look at when I started 20 something years ago learning about attachment, it was your attachment set by 5 years old. You are locked in. It will be that way forever. It's based on how your mother and father treated
Mhm.
you. And I was like, well, that seems kind of shitty. Like at 5, you're just like determined
Right.
and you're done.
Right.
That's what you have for the rest of your life. Really, really hopeful to tell people. Um, but then looking at it, what drew me into family therapy, one, I had a mentor who was like my kind of second mom growing up, and she
Mhm.
was an MFT. And she was kind of a hot mess all over the place. And that was the kind of therapy that I wanted to do, was like, you can't just look at somebody in a vacuum. You can't just look at their one experience or how they show up on paper. She was also a big AA person, big AA person.
Yeah.
Um, for herself in recovery and as a facilitator. And it really like kind of opened my right. It's not just, which is so relieving, right? Like it's not just what my mom and dad did to me by the time I was 5.
Yeah.
It's like, how does the world interact with me and how do I
Mhm.
interact with the world? That's what forms our attachment. So like
Mhm.
if I'm constantly looking over my shoulder, wondering, am I going to come home and find my parents or not? Like, that's going to impact how I attach to the world. My parents can be perfect, but if the world's not set up to actually keep me safe, then of course my attachment system is going to be based off of that. And I feel like there's not enough emphasis on that and not enough of like, we can actually, as a whole community, like do something about that. Because again, it's not just one person in a vacuum, it's not one family in a vacuum. It's like this larger group collective piece that I think as therapists, we also get like really kind of siloed into like, you see a client, you talk to a client, and then you walk out and you're done. It's like, great, but also, how can we watch all these things going on and not be concerned about the impact that this is going to have on people around us?
No, you're right. When I think about attachment, We've had Miss Elisa was up here last week. We even had you probably know her. I feel like you know her because she's a attachment theorist, addictions therapist, Dr. Mary Crocker Cook or something of that sort.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
she does a lot of attachment theory work. She's got a residential program. But anyways, long story short, with that, one of the things that, as you said, and I was taught the same thing. Attachment theory. You learn this, boom, you're stuck with it for the rest of your life, and there's nothing you can do about it. And yes, and Ruben, I've heard you share about your experience too. We grow up with these, seeing this world, right? And we encode these messages. Oh, this is not safe. That's safe. This is not safe. That's safe. And even myself, personally and professionally, I've seen that transform out into others where people, when you're talking about trust, there's no trust on anything. Doctors, nurse, psychiatrist, psychologist, therapist, hospital, nothing. And where does it go back to? Right. Is attachment stuff, right? But then when you start working with them, they're able to build a little bit of trust over it, a little bit here and there. But it takes this much trust, takes this much willingness to help them. And it's got to be a positive experience.
I
It
think
can't
it's
be
enlightening to know that what Lynn was saying about, I used to hear that a lot. That by the age of 5, your personality is formed, and whatever is locked in is locked in. But working with other patients and clients here, and over time, I see that, I'm glad to hear that is changing, because I know I had a clinical supervisor who used to say, as a child, those messages that we hear, they stay with us. And she said we don't dismantle them. But she was saying that as we grow older, we can replace those negative messages that we hear as a child with positive messages, and that's what balances all that out. And how do you feel about that? I mean, that's what she believed in.
I mean, I think yes, absolutely. You can balance things out. You can have different experiences that kind of retell your story. And so I
Hmm.
get new information and I'm going to look at my past in a whole new light. So I work primarily with adults now, which, side note, I hated working with couples, and the only like almost non-passing grade I got was trauma um in grad school. So I somehow ended up in trauma, was my passion, and working with couples, which I never ever wanted to do. So oh, what I think is like how how you got those messages does impact how you interact with the world. And then yes, you can put on those kind of positive reframes. And so it's a little bit of both, and like, I learned this way, I learned I wasn't good enough, I learned the world wasn't safe, I learned my parents were unpredictable. And then I learned that wasn't the only case. But how I grew up is also going to impact how I take in new information. So it's working with both of those parts, that like the part of me that still is afraid of the world or feels like the world's going to come and get me is also still there. So how do I work with that part of me? Because it's going to come up sometimes, and it's going to come up and try to interfere with my life because it wants to keep me safe in a very over dramatic way. And so how do I understand that for what it is, and not just say, oh, that's in the past and it's gone forever. So I think there's like, sometimes people switch to the other side of the pendulum and it's like, oh, I'm not like that anymore. That never impacts me anymore. And it's like, yeah, but not really. It's still there somewhere.
Yes. Now I agree, because the old saying, my wife would tell you that probably becoming a counselor, having 25 years experience, even though it might be limited to substance abuse, that it has helped me, because oftentimes that old saying, physician, heal thyself, a lot of times when I'm engaging someone in therapy or talking to someone, I internalize those things as well. You know what I'm saying? So I think it definitely, like, it definitely helps as well. Like, to how you interact with the world, making you more aware. I'm not saying I can't. Those things that I heard as a child, they do stay with you, but I always say you learn the process of how to, I don't know the word, but I agree with what you were saying earlier. So what approaches do you sometimes, I know there's numerous approaches, but when you work with uh, someone who's trauma, like a child, and you, like I know where I'm at now, I see couples and with substance addictions and they have children. I see the kids and I just say like sometimes, uh, you can look at the dysfunction and you wonder how that child's going to be in 10, 12, 15 years, where they're going to be at. And what are some approaches that you use when you work with, say, children and what have you?
Yeah, well, I right now I don't work a ton with kids, but that is my background. I was a preschool teacher for years, and
Yes.
um, so with kids, some of it is how do I trying to say this without cursing a lot. How
Go
do I
ahead. I mean,
recognize?
we're organic.
How do I learn what's real around me? Right, like as kids, we're designed to want to seek out our caregivers. But at some point, I'm thinking I worked with a lot of kids who are kind of like literally mandated to see me and didn't want to and hated a lot of it. So, it was understanding for them, how do I align? How do I slowly build that trust, like you were both saying
Mhm,
earlier?
mhm.
And then how do I help them see what's what? Like, it sucks that your parent can't show up for you. It
Yes,
sucks
yes,
that
yes.
you actually can't be your full self at home. So,
Mhm,
how do we resource you enough until you can get out of there? Or how do we find those community supports? Or how do we find the little allyships that you can reach for? So I would have kids look at like books, like we would use imaginary things to be like, what can you look for as like, this is what I want my life to be? So, a lot of future imagining. And so sometimes it's about that because it can also be, hey, my parents are really trying their best and they have this other issue, right? They drink too much and so they're inconsistent. I can see that for what it is. I can this is like older teenagers I'm thinking of.
mhm,
I can see them for what they are. I can see the suffering that they have, and that doesn't excuse their actions. So those are kind of the things that I work with a lot of kids around, especially if they're in family systems where I'm not working with the parents. When I'm working with the parents, then I may help them kind of understand, what are
mhm.
you replicating here with your kids, and how do we maybe start to heal parts of yourself that are still getting activated every time your kid pisses you off. But I don't know, you both might have other opinions.
Does anyone else have that one tool that makes building a website a breeze? In an era driven by digital change, WebHash is the indispensable tool that holds the key to effortless website creation. Create websites that endure, defy censorship, and bypass any single point of failure. As cutting-edge technology redefines reality, seize the power to build beyond limits. Join the Web3 revolution now and forge paths others can only dream of. Visit our site today and build your legacy. Building my own space on the web was always a grind until I hit up WebHash. Their no-code builder is my ace. It's swift and solid. It's like rocking a digital fortress that's immune to the typical shutdowns. Level up your web presence without stress. Ready to stake your claim in the digital realm? Dive into WebHash today, connect your Web3 wallet, and get started. They have multiple subscription plans, from a free version to a lifetime subscription. Check them out today at webhash.com. Most importantly, they sponsor the One Moment podcast, helping to raise awareness to critical topics in the healthcare field. Our official website was built using the WebHash platform. Throughout the projects that the One Moment movement built on WebHash, they stood behind and supported it all the way. Sign up and start building your website today. Don't forget to visit onemoment.chain.box and subscribe to our social media channels.
No, I'm actually sitting here thinking about what you're sharing, and I was taken back to disorganized attachment. I was taken back to avoidant attachment, and those are just two of them out of what is it, 4 or 5 different attachment styles.
Depends on who you talk to.
Yeah, right. I mean, I know. I mean, that's like the theory of emotions. Well, how many do we have? Some people say 7, some people say 8, 12, 24, 60 plus. Depends on who you talk to. But yeah, no, what you were sharing was took me back to a disorganized attachment style and how it is even cultivated. And so, you shared a lot of how you work with teenagers on that. So I guess I like to ask a kind of a similar question, right? But take it to adults now. Um, when you meet an adult who has the avoidant or disorganized attachment style, is it the same approach, or is it different? And double question here. Okay, I know we ain't supposed to ask double questions. Uh, is it are the characteristics the same? Because like on how it's expressed. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah. So I think one, I love like disorganized attachment is my favorite attachment system to work with. It's near and dear to my heart. I understand it very well. Um, and I think it does show up different because disorganized, avoidant, I'm avoiding the thing that I think is dangerous. If I can keep everything cool, calm, collected and not rock the boat with like an emotion or anyone else's emotion, I'm good. Anxious is I need to belong. I need to do whatever I can to belong to the group because if I don't, I'm going to die, right? Like as a kid, that's what our brains think to some degree, oversimplification. But so, those are a little bit obvious. You tend to see the outward expression of it, right? I'm afraid of this, so I do this instead. Disorganized has a nice mix of all of the things. So you may have one person that's disorganized and is a kid who acts out all the time. And so I have clients who are like, my parents hit me. And so I would know if it hit a certain time of the day and they hadn't exploded yet, I was going to go in and make them explode because then I can control it. So I was the bad kid. I was a scapegoat. Or you have the kid who's like, if I can be perfect all the time, I can stay under the radar. I can be invisible. I can maybe get praise in this other area. I can, do well in a sport or at school or whatever. And so disorganized, you get a mix of all of the things. So it's not as outwardly obvious to people, which is why I think it goes really undiagnosed for a long time. So my adults, what I see, and it's probably my setting. If I was in a different place, it might be a little different. But what I primarily see are both sets of kids, but who are now over functioning adults. So they usually have a good career. They usually have a family and a relationship, but they don't have a sense of their internal world, right? My world was never about me. It was always about scanning the environment. It was always about knowing what was going to happen next. How do I avoid it? How do I get harm? How do I protect those around me? And so again, we can think about this in the family system, but also in a larger system. If I'm at school and there's a raid that comes through and my classmates are all crying and screaming and adults are running around, like I'm going to have a response, right? I'm going to get angry or I'm going to get scared and I'm going to hide away. And so as adults, they tend to be really good at masking. So they have all the things that check off the boxes that they're a healthy, successful adult. And then I talk to them and their partners are like, I'm ready to leave them. They're great. They're wonderful, but there's nothing there, right? If I don't start the conversation, they don't talk to me. If they get overwhelmed, they disappear. They go inside themselves and I'm left alone and abandoned. And they usually pair up with somebody who's anxious, and then the anxious person is like, where'd you go? I need you to come back. That freaks them out and they withdraw even more. So that's what I see a lot of. So a lot of like self-medicating happens, a lot of disassociation happens, and sometimes that happens in very like productive ways. So they kind of scoot under the radar. So that's what I see. That's how they kind of present a little differently. But when I get to the backstories of how they were as kids, like vary really across the board. I have kids who've kind of done all sorts of things. The thing is like they chameleon. They like know how to read the situation and then act accordingly. So again, they have no sense of their internal world. And that's the part that feels like they'll be like, what's wrong with me? Like this is so easy for everyone else. I don't understand. I don't understand what my partner's saying, be emotionally attached to me. What the hell is that? Like I can't define that. I'm here. I'm not abusive. I'm not, using substances. I'm not doing da 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 da. But it's like I don't know how to emotionally connect because I don't know what my own internal emotions are. So I don't know if that answered your question. I just kind of went off on a tangent.
No, it did. It did. And I do appreciate it because I think there's as you said, and I think this is the most simple answer, right? For anybody watching it. Uh, we're taught early on that this attachment stays with us, this, that, and third can never be changed. And so you just explained a lot of it, what happens from childhood, adolescence to adulthood. So no, I sincerely and humbly do appreciate it. Thank you.
If I was to go to a therapist such as yourself, I would like to, ultimately, my goal would be to like, not fix me, but to, uh, so I can maneuver in the world and be happy and adjust and interact with the world. So I always wonder, like when I became a substance abuse counselor, I used to think my approach was initially, this was 25 years ago, that I would talk to my supervisor about that. I felt like a person comes in with the problem, and my role is to fix it. And by the end of the session, hand them this gift and say, "Here, this is what you need to do," and all is well. But I'm learning over the that's not how therapy or counseling works. So, what helps you to uh, keep from getting burned? You said 25, you keep from getting burned out. Feel hopeful about what you do.
I think it's owning that. Like I say this to my clients all the time. Like I've spent a lot of money on grad school. I've done a lot of years of training to try to think my way out of feelings, to try to figure out what that magic key of things that I need to do to be a good human. And like it's
Yes.
not out there. And that's a thing that we know, but we don't know until we really feel it. Um, and so I think I have enough clients that do make that shift and I can like see that movement happen. I can see that shift of like, man, when you first came in, you were shaking because you were so anxious. I could barely
Mhm.
like get a sentence out. Like you couldn't even form a full sentence without being anxious and kind of falling apart. Now you have this beautiful community around you. That's not every single client, but I have enough of those that I'm like,
Yeah.
you get it. You get that there's not an ABC answer and you're finding your
Mhm.
way back to yourself. You're finding like, how do I trust myself? How do I like tune into my internal world? Because it has been there all along. I just had to turn it off because survival was more important. So seeing that moment, I think really helps. And then, having people around me that I can actually talk to about this because like it is hard and sometimes I just want to like joke around or vent and I have other trauma therapists that I can do that with.
Okay, great. Yes.
Well, it's all about having that social network. And Ruben, when you were talking, I was thinking maybe she could help you with your disorganized attachment style.
What is that? I don't know if I should be insulted or what.
I'm staying out of this one.
Right? Oh gosh, listen.
Explain to me when you say disorganized. First of all, for our population out there, what do you mean by disorganized attachment? I like
This
Lynn to explain it to us.
disorganized attachment is where they're confused or contradictory behaviors approaching and then freezing, right? It could be that the caregivers were often frightening, abusive, or neglectful. And so, because of the way you treat me, right? I am diagnosing you now. I'm picking. I'm picking. So out of all these, I don't know. This is my question to you, Miss Lynn. So we have these attachment theory, right? Which is I'm seeing to become more dominant. I shouldn't say dominant, but they're becoming more discussed about, right? Clinically, they are. Um, what what specific or is there, maybe, and this is for the audience here, right? Is there a specific type of theoretical modality that you primarily work in, or and if so, tell us a little bit about it, right? If not, are you more like an eclectic, if that's even a thing with family and marriage therapists? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. No, marriage and family therapy loves to take a little from everything. So It works in systems. Again, the hot mess thing really works for me. So I'm eclectic, but I think with attachment wounds, it is about doing that internal work of like, how do I tune back into my internal systems, which there's this big debate, right? We did really like heady therapy where it's like CBT, let's change our thoughts, that'll change how we feel about ourselves. And then people go shift to the other side and say, no, 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 you need to do a bottom up. You need to focus on the body and feel into the body. And then you can process those feelings from the body. With disorganized attached folks, you need both. Like, and neurodiverse kids, people go into the same bucket for me. You need to understand why you're asking somebody to go into their body, which feels terrible and unsafe, on a logical level before they can drop into it. And you need to be able to kind of go through both. So the specific tools don't necessarily matter all that much, but something that mixes like, how do I cognitively understand that the way that I remembered life is actually only part of the story? Because I missed out on my internal world and I had to shape it around other people. And then how do I learn to feel what's in my gut? How do I learn to feel what I'm actually feeling? Like, we say I feel all the time. I've said it like a million times, but we often don't actually know what that means. So if I'm disorganized attachment, I say, okay, go process this feeling. They're like, well, happiness feels like somebody smiling and this and this and this. And it's like, that's actually not a feeling at all. Like, you're not describing anything that's happening in your body. So things like EMDR can be really helpful. Brain spotting can be really helpful. Somatic work can be really helpful. There's trauma focused yoga. There's like a million zillion things out there. And I think they all work. But what I found is you need both, right? Your client or the client that I'm working with needs to know why I'm asking them to tap into their body, because that's really, really scary and overwhelming. And then I need to practice with them. So helping them walk through, like, what is it to take a breath? What is it to notice? What's coming up for you? Like, what does that statement even mean? And break it down kind of to the smallest component. So I gave like the therapist answer of like, it depends, all of the things work. But I think it does really depend on the client and the therapist. Like, I do somatic work and I do a lot of RLT. So I do a lot of like, let's understand the backstory that's causing you to act in the ways that you do in your current relationship. But another therapist may use something else and it may work perfectly fine for the next client. So I think we get caught up sometimes on like, this modality only works for this thing. But it's like, why would that make any logical sense? Like, everyone's different. Everyone's going to respond to everything differently. Every therapist is going to be good at different things. So, yeah, I don't know, Ruben, if that's the same in the substance counseling, if people are like, you have to do it this very specific way.
No, I gravitate towards different approaches like cognitive behavioral therapy. And then the approach we talk about always meeting a client where they're at. We do a lot of, I've done a lot of training because every 2 years I'm coming up on that now. I have to do like 60 CEUs so to stay abreast of different techniques and what have you. And what's the big thing now is motivational interviewing. And it talks about oftentimes, I remember when I first started in this field, and I was working under someone, and this person, he was a therapist that probably definitely I would want to emulate. And it was nothing wrong. He was in recovery himself, and after he finished, he during that time he just worked at the facility, and eventually they made him a counselor. Over the years, substance abuse field has, instead of becoming paraprofessional, became more professional. And I know that they stopped grandfathering people in who were just in recovery, and they had a curriculum and they had different organizations to certify you and what have you. So I find that over the years, this person was very confrontational. I would watch him, and he would confront the patients. And I found over the years that just doesn't work. It's talking about meeting the patient or the client where they're at, and guiding them along and recognizing if you're in recovery, it's not your recovery, but it's theirs. But one of the things I found that even all the training I had in the schooling and all that, one of the biggest determinants how well uh, you work with that patient is that therapeutic alliance or that bond with that patient. And I think that's important. I find that I've been here like this clinic right here 13 years, and I find that I see that with patients. sometimes there's a big turnover in substance, especially medication assisted treatment, and patients like consistency, and they always long for like, I would like to have a counselor that's there that I can form that bond. That I don't have to keep telling my story over and over and over. And I get that. So I think forming that therapeutic alliance is very important. And all those things I learned in school is important too. But I learned a lot through trial and error. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, because if you meet yeah, confrontation works maybe a little bit in certain situations, but nothing works across the board for any
Yes.
in any way.
Right. No, both of you are right. And so I definitely have seen where, uh, I've had to confront patients, uh, and I actually just recently experienced that. And, I was challenging and confronting him and his ideologies, right, and his behaviors, and finally, right, the light bulb came on, right? Like how you mentioned earlier, you could see the switch somewhere in between, right? And I was able to see that switch, right? And he was finally like, what we were talking about was clicking for him. So yeah, I definitely would agree. Not one approach is the best or is the same for across all people. And that's what frustrates me about the substance use field. You did ask him a question about that. The last 10 years has been nothing but this brain disease of addiction. And yet, let's look at how far that's really helped, right? And so when we talk about, somatic therapy, EMDR, stuff that you're doing, I think that's important to understand that there's more for all addiction therapists watching this. It's more than just a brain disease model of addiction. A whole lot more to the field to helping people grow and learn. And I was reading up on as I was going through some of your bio. Um, there's a part in there. It said, and I'm gonna read word for word, but it said that it attached New York, I think it is right, or NY. Our focus is on helping queer, neurodiverse, and marginalized clients understand the protective patterns they developed in response to relational trauma. So, uh, do you find that when it comes to working with the minority populations, right? And I know you kind of answered this with the neurodiverse folks earlier, but so I guess excluding that population, do you find that your approach is different than people who are not who doesn't meet the population who are not considered minority? Do you feel? I think that's what I'm trying to ask.
Yeah, well, it, it's like annoying therapist answer of like yes and no, but it's yes and no. When I interact with somebody, when I meet a client and I'm gathering their history,
Mhm.
part of that is their culture, right? How did you learn about relationships? What did your family model for you? What did the community around you model for you? And that's inherently going to have race in there. That's inherently going to have sexuality, sexism, right? All of the different components. So how was your identity reflected or not reflected around you? How did people respond if you came out, like if you were queer and you came out, was that something that was a big deal or not around you? And so all of that I think plays into it. I think um primarily with couples, I'll see this where they come from different cultures. And so I will respond a little bit differently depending on their dynamic. So I'll see this especially if there's like a white partner and a person of color partner together, maybe helping that white person move out of that kind of fragile stance of like, I'm not a bad guy, and into, okay, and you've had different lived experiences. You go out into the world and the world looks at you differently than your partner. What is that like? And I'll see this with like queer clients where one is more masculine and one's more feminine, right? When I go out into the world, I had a client who was trans, and they're like, when I go into the world, people look at me and I don't fit into a girl or a boy box. My partner doesn't have that. And so sometimes, like, their desire for closeness when they're out in public was different because the person who presented as trans was like, I'm more nervous for safety reasons.
Yeah.
So it was like kind of helping them understand, how do your like social locations, how does your identity impact how you show up in this relationship in terms of how this relationship is responded to by the people around you.
Mm.
So yes and no.
No, I think one of the things that I've seen a lot. I don't know if a lot is the appropriate word to use there, but my first experience in working with the LGBTQ population, there was people in the agency who, I shouldn't say unconsciously biased, but I think it fits. They were unconsciously biased, treating this person. Okay, this was the only transgender in the agency, right? This 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 individual was being treated so inhumanely by professionals, medical professionals. And I ended up having to advocate because I'm like, look, you can't be doing that, right? Like, and so we were all mandated to training and stuff like that. And I'm gonna be straight with you. Those folks, they were frustrated, they were mad because they were like, man, we didn't do anything. Eh, the way you talk to people, let's work on some communication here. Um, but you, I shared that, right, to go back to what you were saying, those communication patterns, right? Those emotional responses, right? This individual didn't feel accepted. This individual felt like they were not a part of, like they weren't even a patient, right? Like they weren't even receiving quality services that everyone else was receiving, right? Just because they identified as being a transgender. Um, and it's sad because, one of the things I love about DBT, and that's one of the forms that I use now, right? A lot of I mix DBT in with existentialism. But what I love is helping people understand the non-judgmental aspect of DBT. Let's take away all these things, right? Let's take away all these labels. Let's take away everything that we can think about somebody. What are we left with? Nothing. There's just a human being, regardless of. And so it is about trying to help people, I think, feel a part of, feel connected with one another, as you were sharing.
Yeah. I- yeah, I really like that. And it's similar. I've been doing RLT training for, I mean, years and years now, but officially doing the certification now. And what I really like about this approach, it's Terry Real. He's written like a million books. He's an interesting guy. He talks about, it's all about relation. It's relation life therapy, right? We're in relationship with everyone around us, and the key to it is keeping same as, right? I can hate everything about you, everything you do, everything you represent, whatever, and still treat you as a human, right? Like I can keep you on the same playing field as me. So we talk about this in couples relationships, but also on a larger scale. And I think as the professionals in this mix, like we hold a degree of power over our clients. Like they're coming to us for a service, right? I have substance issues. I need you to sign off on this thing, or I need you to fix me. I need you to fix my marriage. And so if we aren't actually treating people as humans, then we're not only harming them, but we're also setting them up to like not trust that system, right? I'm not going to trust. So many of my clients come to me and they're like, here's this horrific story that a therapist did to me. Here's this thing. And it's all coming from the professional world. And so I think it is something that we often ignore and are like, oh, we know all the things. We don't need to like look at this anymore, or look at how our own biases show up here,
Mm.
because we're the professionals. We know how to do all these things. And so I think there's a lot of harm that gets done. And I think for the most part it's unintentional. I think some people are actively like don't care to see what's happening that they're doing. But yeah, I think a lot of harm gets done in our field, and it's hard to fight that as a client. Like what am I going to do if my therapist is treating me like less than human or pathologizing me because of who I am? I don't really have anywhere to go with that. I feel powerless in that situation. So,
Feeling lost or alone, struggling with unbearable trauma or addiction. Every day feels heavier than the day before. The weight of unaddressed emotions and problems can leave you paralyzed. On the One Moment podcast, we are aligned with the vision and mission of the Place to Heal. Founded in Sanford, North Carolina, the Place to Heal is a growing multi-specialty mental health and substance use practice dedicated to facilitating healing and personal development. Our team of compassionate clinicians are committed to providing evidence-based therapeutic interventions tailored to each individual's unique journey. We are passionate about empowering our clients to overcome challenges and achieve emotional wellness. The Place to Heal hosts and sponsors the One Moment podcast. Visit onemoment.chain.box to learn more about our podcast and to be connected to the Place to Heal. Follow us on social media for more content.
That's why they say you have to be aware of like counter transference, how you interact with that client or patient. I know sometimes, like when I'm doing a group once, and I remember a situation where one of the clients in the group said something derogatory about someone being gay, and I addressed that, and he said, "Well, why does it matter? No one in this group is gay." I said, "But you don't know that. You know what I'm saying? That you don't know that." So I think as a counselor, I have to be aware of that as well and make the whole group feel protected, like a safe place. So if I had went along, he made a joke. If I had went along with that joke, what is that saying to somebody who's maybe in a group who hasn't come out? Okay, I'm joking and going along with that. What does that say? That's saying this place is not a safe place to be. So I always say as a counselor, you have to be aware of that. And I always say not just tolerate, not try to embrace different diversity. I always say, but it's important. We do trainings and what have you, but it's important to be aware also of your biases and to be open and to learn. Because I remember working with, you talking about race, I remember working with somebody when I first started here about 13 years ago. And I was in this, it's a person who lived in a rural area. And he said clearly, I don't want Ruben as my counselor because I'm black. Then I remember one Saturday, there was no other counselor. He had a crisis. And so I saw him pacing back and forth to the door. And finally he came in and he talked. And to skip forward, I mean, over the years, uh, I actually I became his counselor and got to know him and got to understand him why he felt that way and how his thinking changed over the years. And I saw him as generally, my perception, because initially I was told to stay away from him. But even over the years, my perception, getting an understanding, I always say it's hard to demonize someone when you really, a group, when you really get to know them. And that's what I find, that when you get to know a person, it's hard you can let go of those biases and you don't necessarily have to demonize them, but buy into that perception.
yeah. I think it's like just like relationships, right? We
Yes,
we project something that we don't like about ourselves onto somebody else, make a whole story
true.
about it, and then try to
Hmm.
avoid it at all costs. And I
Hmm.
think we do that in these big groupings of all people like this, do this. And
Yes, yeah.
yeah.
I've always been interested in, like, just because you see patients that come here that go through trauma, and and I often say, it's unfortunate, like you said, you didn't have that father who would take you fishing and you go off to the sunset and what have you, and you pat each other on the back and you're embracing each other, going fishing. I said, it's unfortunate I don't have that. And, it's skipping forward. I say sometimes that, it's a process to work through that, to work through that trauma and what have you. And it's a whole process. People ask me, but Ruben, in the end, can you be happy? I say, I didn't grow up in severe trauma, but I always tell people at 69, I think I'm much more happier. I'm more comfortable in my own skin. I wouldn't trade youth, go back 20 or 30 years. No way. I'm a better person, even though I know my time on this earth is less. I feel I'm a better person where I'm at, how I interact with the world. I would never want to go back to my 18 or 2020. I wouldn't, unless I had the knowledge I have now, which I wouldn't. Yeah, so
Definitely wouldn't have had the same 20s if I knew the
yes,
things I knew now.
right.
Right, right. They say hindsight is 2020. That's the only type of perfect vision we ever have.
Sure.
No, I mean what both of you were sharing, right? And we talk about trauma and we talk about systems, right? And I'm not an expert by any means. Again, I'm not an expert in family therapy nor a systems approach, but I enjoy group therapy. So I'd say I do consider myself an expert for the most part in group therapy. But one of the things that both of you had me thinking about was uh, it is uh, ecological systems theory. I think that's the name of it. Um, and the reason I say that is because both of you talked about, right, and of course I'm gonna throw myself under the bus there, but we were talking about a system that could re-traumatize people if we're not careful, right? And so just imagine, right, all those folks that you've worked with, Miss Lynn, in your situation in that group, right, where if depending on how we operate, depending on what we do, right, where people don't have that voice, right, where we create the opportunity for people not to have that voice. And this is regardless of minority status, right? This is anybody who we are providing services to. But that's something I think needs to be talked about more, is how do we not re-traumatize people,
Mhm.
and via the healthcare system, because we're all part of it. We're the second cousin to the healthcare system, but we're still part of the healthcare system.
Yeah. Well, I think it's being able to acknowledge that this is a problem, right? Like sounding like an AA, but like, being able to say, yes, we have issues. Our system is built on some structures that are inherently oppressive. And so how do we look at that and not just say, okay, not me, I'm not the bad guy here, and say, hey, I have some stuff because I learned in a world that has a lot of oppressive pieces to it. How do I work with that and understand that I have a responsibility to do the best I can and find ways of checking myself, of connecting with others so that I'm not in a little silo where I'm only talking to other white therapist women. Like that's a very easy little niche for me to find myself in. But then I might be missing all these other ways that I'm showing up inappropriately for clients. And so it's like, I have to know that I don't know everything. I'm going to make mistakes. Um, I do have a position of power with my clients and
Mhm.
in the world, and that's not a bad thing. I just have to figure out how do I use that so I'm not putting it over somebody? How do I stay same as another person? And, as a therapist, help them see like we are same as, and I have things I can offer you. I have insights I can give you. But ultimately, you're the expert of your own experience, and so am I. And how do we learn from each other? Like, I think we don't do enough of getting our clients to open up in that way. Like, how can you help me learn about you? What am I missing? Without putting on our clients to like educate us. But, that's why a lot of when we do intakes and when we're getting to know people, it's asking all these questions, not just, what's happening right here, right now, but what's happened in your past.
Mhm.
I have plenty of clients where I'm talking to them and they're like, everything was fine, everything was fine, everything was fine. I dig a little deeper and they're like, oh, well, we were the only Black family in this one part in the UK where it was right next to the headquarters of, I forget what their KKK is, but that. And it was like, oh, maybe that has something to do with your attachment system. Maybe that's something that we should be talking about. And so I think it's having those conversations, not being afraid to ask those questions, not being afraid to like get things wrong and learn and adjust and make our clients like equal experts while also holding our seat as somebody that's offering them something.
So you have to be aware because working, making sure I've been here 13 years and making sure I always try to do my part to make sure that it's a healthy work environment. And because with you mentioned earlier with substance abuse and recognizing that addiction is a family disease, there's certain roles that family members take on, like the scapegoat, the lost child, and sometimes in a work environment, you can see the staff take on those different roles as well. So you have to be aware of that, and make sure, I try to do all I can to promote that environment. And I know if I think one of the things you can do is letting the provide an opportunity for that client to see that human side. I remember uh, when I was working in New York, I worked at a hospital there for like 15 years as a counselor. And I remember during that time, my mother had passed. And somehow, which I didn't mind, one of the patients found out my mother lived in the South. So I went to her funeral and I came back to New York. And I remember a patient uh, come up to me and said, "I'm sorry about your mom." And I literally lost it because it was fresh and new. But the director said, "Ruben, for that person, the I was in the lobby at the time, for them to see that, they see that you're human, that you experience emotions, So I don't think that was a bad experience to witness. You know what I mean? So I think that's important for if I had a situation one time. I was probably in a bad mood, and I can be. Kevin knows I could be. I always say that's that New York, living in New York 40 years. So I remember a patient said something, and I might have snapped at him, and then I went back to the lobby in front of everybody, and I apologized. And he said, "Oh no, you didn't do anything wrong." I said, "No, I did," and I apologized. And I think those things are important. We're therapists or counselors, but we are human, and we recognize we make mistakes. And I always say my role is to remember with the ethics that we have to sign and review every 2 years when I get certified. It basically sums it down: do no harm to the patient or the client. And I always try to keep that in mind.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's an important piece that, like, and maybe again, my model was kind of a hot mess with no boundaries. So my model of substance abuse therapy was a little different.
Yes.
But I feel like we're trained to be blank, right? Like it's all about the client. You need to focus on the client. Don't bring your stuff in, which makes sense. And
Yes.
I don't turn off being a human when I walk in the room with somebody, and
Right.
trying to pretend like I'm not a human is actually not healthy or helpful to creating a
Oh,
secure
no.
space with the person.
No. Yeah.
I remember you sparked my memory. I had a client who I worked with for years and years, and I still every so often get updates from her, and it's lovely. But she was really struggling, like couldn't get out of bed, depressed beyond depressed. Really was like, we need to do something. For weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks, we're working together. And one day, I kind of was like, I don't know. We're gonna have to do a higher level of care. Like, I just really, I'm not reaching her where she is. And I had like kind of from my gut said, man, I was thinking about you the other day because I didn't want to exercise, and you've been so good about doing your. I think I don't. We worked out something where she was doing like a couple steps in her bedroom a day. I was like, I thought about you, and I really was like, okay, I can do this. If you can do this, I can do this. And that was like the moment that things switched for her. She was like, she told me a couple of weeks later, she's like, I was like, oh, you're getting up, you're getting dressed, you're doing all these things. And she's like, you told me that you struggled with going to the gym, whatever it's doing.
Mhm.
And if you can struggle, then it's okay that I struggle. Like I'd done my best to make us same as like, but I think there
Mhm.
was a little bit of like putting me on a pedestal of like,
Mhm.
okay, my
Mhm.
therapist struggles with stuff. Oh, right. Like all humans struggle. I'm struggling. And that's not because I'm a faulty person. That's not because I'm broken. That's not because something's wrong with me. It's because I'm a human who struggles sometimes. And I think that was such a powerful moment that obviously I wouldn't do with every client, but it was such a
Yes.
good reminder for me that like being a human is not a bad thing in therapy.
Well, do you ever find that, I don't know, because what I found, let me preface my question. What I've found through the practice of DBT is that it opens that door for a little bit more leniency for self-disclosure. I can't speak for all other therapeutic modalities, only the ones that I've, worked out of, right? And so I found that when I do self-disclose, I don't go deep into the personal, but I will share some experiences, right? And so what I found is that has been somewhat well, not somewhat, but that's been very beneficial. So my question is, do you ever find that when you talk about attachment theory, when you talk about self-disclosure, do you ever disclose any of your experiences within various attachment styles to help people out?
Yeah, it's part of what I really like about RLT is very responsibly it uses a lot of self-disclosure. If you look at Terry Real, he'll tell you his whole life story, and every client has access to these things. So I don't mind, like, if clients watch an interview I do like this and they find out stuff about me, like, fine. I'm not going to bring everything into the therapy room, but I think that I have clients who, um thinking about another client who, like, on paper could not have any more different experiences, like completely different identities, grew up in completely different areas, everything different. But at the end of our therapy together, he's like, I don't know what it is. He's like, but I know that you get it. I know that you understand. Like, he's like, I'm going to assume we did not have the same experience, uh, but I know that you get it. And I think without that self disclosure of, like, this is what's hard for me as somebody who wants to run away from feelings, as somebody who became a therapist part to, like, focus on other people's feelings and not my own, this is what's hard for me. And I think stuff like that can be really helpful because it again, it's like the same thing with the woman who's like, oh, you suffer too, or you struggle too. It's like, yeah, this is all a work in progress. Going back to, like, I want to be able to give them this gift at the end. It's like, I wish that there was, like, an ABC you can follow, but it's really just
Right.
understanding that
Yeah.
suffering is a piece of this, and that's not inherently wrong. Like, so I disclose kind of a bit also because I don't know, that's just who I am. I'm very transparent. I'm very socially awkward. I just kind of talk how I talk, not good
Yes.
at being professional. So I think it all works together for me, and I hope my clients
Yeah,
benefit.
yeah, nah, I'm right there too. I mean, I've worked with a lot of folks, and one thing I like about Ruben, I'm gonna pick on you for a moment. When I started, this is self-disclosure here, okay? Ruben is actually the one that took me under his wing early on and taught me a lot, and then I would be meeting with patients, and at least my first 150 sessions, every one of them would tell me the same thing. I'm not a book, Kevin. Just talk to me like I'm a person. Noted, understood. And so, but I went through all of that headache and heartache of growing and counselor identity, right? And so now it's like you said, right? When I'm doing my groups, when I'm doing the individuals, even on the phone calls with people that I'm having to make to families, and remember, I'm not a family therapist, but one of the things I'm grateful for is I remind myself to be authentic, as you were just sharing, right? Just be yourself. You're a human being. You're going to make a mistake. Don't harp on the mistake, but reflect on the mistake and what you can learn from it. And so that's one of the things I found to be very beneficial uh, in the therapeutic relationship, right? Whether it's attachment style, whether it's trauma, substance use, whatever the theoretical modality is, authenticity. Just be yourself, Kev. Everything else is going to flow. Uh, but I'm also mindful of what I share too, like self-disclose.
Well, Kevin mentioned it, but since he said that, I, I, I a few times I've peeked at Kevin's social media, and I remember one of his family members saying, "Kevin, dumb me it down a little bit, dumb me it," because I always initially, Kevin's a forever student, so a lot of times, he would use those big phrases, and I say, "Kevin, those patients don't understand it. Just dumb it down a little bit," like. So I know, and I used to say to him sometimes that he's gotten a lot better. I used to say, you have behind, remember, it's intellectualism and all that. I say you have to, So my wife would tell you, we've been married 45 years, and she jokes, she said, Ruben, you're the sensitive one because, for example, when it like for emotions and stuff, she'll tell my daughter, go talk to your father or something like that. So I always say, switching roles. It's like I'm the female for as the being sensitive and stuff like that. My wife laughs about that, but I always found that over the years that took growth, being comfortable as a male to being able to express emotions because sometimes we're taught not. Like when I get a patient who's a male to come in my office and they start crying, then they apologize. I want them to feel safe that, you know what, that you shared that emotion. It was powerful. And I felt that and you acknowledged that. So, you know, I think sometimes when a male, especially a male client, they see that the counselor is comfortable, then they're comfortable with that as well. So we have to oftentimes model that behavior that we want from our patients. So I agree with you, letting them see the human side of myself. Sometimes that's important. Yeah.
And like you said, it's thoughtful. We're not just like randomly being like, let me tell you about my week and how annoying my husband is. Or da, da,
Yes.
da, da, da.
Right.
We're
Right.
we're being
Right.
thoughtful, and
Sure.
we're not really sharing personal right. Like, it was hard for me to go to the gym. It's hard for me to do this in interactions. I think what we share, like a man having feelings, like it's
Hmm.
not. It doesn't have to be about us to still show up as like my full
Yes.
authentic self and a human who struggles and makes mistakes. So yeah, I think self-disclosure is one of those weird therapist-y things that
Yes. They
people get
always
very
tell
weird
us,
about.
just look at the reason in substance abuse. Why are you doing it? Am I doing it to skip that process with that patient and skip the whole process and to develop that instant bond? Look at why am I doing it? And a lot of times I see uh, relative new clients, counselors who might be in recovery. They from the day one, oh, I'll share I'm in recovery. And I ask, why do you do that? So well, I think I can establish that bond. And I said that takes a process to establish that bond. That doesn't always happen because you're in recovery. Like that bond, that therapeutic bond takes time to develop. Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that too. Like, just because I have a shared experience with you does not mean that I know anything about how you've dealt with your
Yes. Good.
experience.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now,
So
do you find that uh, how do I want to word it? How do I want to question it? Do you find that cultural biases in attachment theory or attachment therapy is rather prevalent, or do you feel like they are impactful on the therapeutic relationship, on the healing process, on the light coming on? I say the light coming on, as just as an analogy, right? But do you feel like cultural biases play a part within?
Does anyone else have that one moment where everything feels too overwhelming to handle? Fortunately, there are therapeutic resources where you will learn the skills necessary to bring clarity and focus amidst chaos, making everything feel manageable again. At Mindfully Me Counseling, we guide you towards clarity and calm with personalized therapy. Embrace your self-care today. Visit mindfullymecounselingplc.com to learn more. We sponsor the One Moment podcast. They meet weekly to discuss critical topics related to mental health, raising awareness on various topics such as substance use, suicide, trauma, family, and more. Visit onemoment.chain.box to learn more about the podcast and to be connected to additional resources. Subscribe to their social media channels for more information.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, right, even thinking about individual cultures and collectivist cultures, right, how you attach and what it means to be anxiously attached or avoidant, it's going to be very different culture to culture. So somebody, right, their degree of secure attachment is still, I share a little bit of, not a little bit of me, but I don't spend the whole time talking about me. I want to make sure everyone around me is also
mhm,
okay. In one
mhm.
culture, that's secure. In another, I'm relying on everyone else to be around me. But we want to know what the cultural context is, right? So if somebody grows up in a culture that's collectivist and they're always looking to other people, that might not be the only indicator. That might not be the indicator that they have like an anxious attachment. So we have to take everything, I think, in context. And then in that, it's like, how do I, when I work with couples, this is where I see it kind of start to clash, where it's like, um, how do I fit in with your family? How do I fit in when we come from different cultures? Um, and I think we don't talk enough about that in attachment. Again, it becomes this kind of black and white. You're this attachment, this attachment, this attachment, that's it. And it's like, well, again, context. Like when I go home to my family and my family culture, a secure attachment looks different than if I'm with my group of friends. That secure attachment is going to look different versus when I'm at my professional job, when I'm at school. Um, so I'm kind of like going off into a side weed conversation, but I think that yeah, I think in general in the theories we don't spend enough time talking about that cultural component, and we try to fit everyone into a box, right? You're this, you're that, and then you apply this medication and then you stop doing this broken thing. And it's like, okay, again, like that's not, it's not human. That's not how humans work. We
Right.
have to understand that cultural component to understand why a person is showing up the way that they're showing up and not deem one thing better than the other.
Yeah, that's like when sometimes when we're talking about racial issues or racial or cultural, a patient who might be white might say, I said, look, I can't speak for I'm just one person. I can't speak for the entire black population. I'll experience. I grew up in the South, and then I moved to the North when I was like 18 and lived there 40 years. So I say everybody's experience. You can't lump everybody together and say I can't speak for my whole entire race, just like you can't speak for a cabinet. You know what I mean? Everybody's experiences are different and what have you. Sure. So
Yeah, yeah. It's funny. It sparks another story about clients,
yeah.
but they have the way that their families handle checks at when they go out to dinner was such a great
Hmm.
example of different cultures. Like it doesn't really matter what the ethnicities were, but
Hmm.
one family, it was like they were like, it you can tackle the waiter, you can like hit somebody's hand away, like you fight over who's going to pay that bill. Like that is how you show respect, that is show how you show love. Like you battle it to the ground, you do
Yes.
whatever you
Yes.
can.
Yeah.
And the other family was the exact opposite. They're like, if grandma offers to pay, you can maybe ask if she wants to split it, but like even that is disrespectful. And so they
Yeah.
had this big clash about one partner would go with the family that's like fighting, and they're like, oh my god, this is so rude, like I can't ever do that. And then their family's like, why didn't your partner offer to pay? They were so rude for sitting there. And then the reverse, right? If I go with his family, they're gonna think I'm rude for trying to battle grandma to the ground to take the check out of her hand. So it's funny how all these little things pop
Yeah.
up.
Yes. Yeah.
It's interesting because when you think about culture, right? And I think this is even for myself. Uh, I don't know. Like I think for the most part, we don't think about the intricacies that go into it, right? I think we think on this macro level, right? Whether it be attachment, not attachment, addiction, or what have you. But culture even involves, as you were just sharing that experience where one family everybody fights over who pays for the check versus the other family. They're like, keep my mouth shut. This person offered to pay. You might ask, are you sure you want me to pay for that? Are you sure? But that even involves culture. Like culture is more than just this textbook uh definition of a group of people who shares the same values, whatever that, add to the list of that textbook, right? Uh, and so, yeah, like I think you really just brought in more information on that. So yeah, I do appreciate you sharing that the example there. Um, what do you feel like some core principles are working as far as a family marriage therapist, couples therapist, and out of the attachment area or attachment realm?
Yeah, I think one, it's owning that this is the way that I do attachment therapy. And there's a million therapists that are going to do it a million different ways. And maybe there's a few that are wrong, but like most of them are also right. They're just different, which is inherently attachment, right? Like I'm not here to prove to you that I know everything about attachment and here's what it is. It's saying, this is how I experience attachment. This is how I see attachment in relationships. These are the patterns that I'm seeing that you're doing that are getting you away from that connection that you're looking at. What can we try together to get you to that point? Why is it hard for you to connect to your partner? Why do you get anxious in these moments? Why do you want to avoid feelings? So it offers that, like, I don't have the answers, you do, and I'm here to help guide you through that maze that is your internal world. So I think to be an attached therapist, you have to understand your own attachment system. You have to be able to detach from outcome, right? I can offer you all this stuff. I can, in my mind, think I know exactly what's going to be best for you. But ultimately, right, I turn off my camera and I go home and take care of my kids. I go and do other things, like, and you go back to your life. It's up to you what you do with that information. So again, I'm not a big one on like tools, although there's plenty of tools out there that are great and wonderful. But it's really like, how do I connect with somebody and understand their experience? Because that's what attachment is, right? I'm forming an attachment with them and I want to supply a secure attachment. I want to be able to challenge them when they're doing something that that isn't wrong, but I'm like, this is the pattern, right? You're afraid to get closer to this feeling. And even right now, when we're talking about this, I can see you falling back. Tell me more about that. Or I can see you going one up. I can see the way you're talking down to your partner. What's going on with you right now? What's happening? Not you're doing that wrong. Stop yelling at your partner. Stop doing this to your partner, but like actually connect with them and say, hey, this thing that you're doing is not getting you what you want. You're talking down to your wife about why she shouldn't be nagging you about A, B, and C, but you're telling me that you want more connection. These two things don't add up. So tell me how we can get you what you want by connecting with you. So I think it's like all about finding that connection point and then figuring out how do I form that attachment with this person? How do I form a secure attachment where I can set limits, where I can offer support and care and do them in the right measure, right? Like not everyone needs soft, gentle care. Not everyone needs a strong confrontation. We kind of play with that a little bit. So it was a very unclear answer. I think
That's why
attachment
I
is a
like.
little bit blurry.
That's why I like. I enjoy doing groups more so than individuals because in a group, I know when I first started doing groups, the director says, "I hear you doing most of the talking, and you know when you're doing most of the talking in a group that probably the group is not going as well as you would like for it to. I think over time, when you hear the clients and patients interacting, and the counselor is not the central focus of the group, that's important. And then when the group can turn around and literally run itself, and over also you can see, I always see you can see the interaction. And I always say the group becomes like a microcosm. Once they become comfortable with each other, the group becomes a microcosm how they interact in their social environment, in their family, and what have you. So that's why I really enjoy doing groups for that reason.
It's sort of similar with like couples and families. Like
Mhm.
everyone, I love the like plain Terry Real borrows a lot of his stuff from the step programs and talking about like what role you play in the family and how you show up is attachment, right? Like, and I get to see that in real time. It's much easier for me to work with that when it's happening between us or it's happening between you and your partner, you and your group member, versus
Mhm.
like reading from a book and being like, this is how you do things well. This is how you be a good human and do the good things and da da da. So I think there is something that's just more alive when you're with more than one person in the room. So
Well, I think, Kevin, this conversation can go on and on. I think Lynn has, you say you have 3 children, right?
I do. I
Yes.
do.
So I'm sure she, at some point, we can go on, but she wants to go home and shower her children with love. So maybe we can start
Yes.
to wrap this up and like that. Okay?
Do not be rushing me, Ruben. I'm enjoying the
Because
conversation
Kevin will
over
go,
here.
I can tell you, Kevin will go on for hours.
Look,
I
you
can
you
tell you
rush
that.
me every Wednesday, okay? You rush me every Wednesday. Oh, Lord have mercy. Miss
We'll
Lynn,
have a little couple session here later.
Yes.
yeah, we're gonna need a couple sessions. It's been about 4 years since we've had one, so I think it's time to go back.
Right.
I'll take it. I'll take it. No, but no, I was actually thinking about my next question, and I think I'm gonna save that for the next time. Because man, like there's so much there's so much to attachment theory that you just can't cover that all on. I mean, there's years and years and years. Uh, but I know where next time we get together, I know where I'm gonna start the conversation off with. Because I think it's very important. Um, I guess two things. Okay, one is when whoever watches this episode, what do you want them to take away from it? All right, that's the first question. What do you hope they gain from it, learn from it, take away from it? Number two is, what is your call to action?
I think I always get some question like this and I always fumble it. So I'll try to do better this time. But I think from this conversation, what I'm taking away at least is that reassurance that like it's okay to be a human. It's okay to suffer. It's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to not know what you're doing. Right. We lead with like our best of intentions and then we make a lot of room for adjustment along the way, which I think you both had really great examples of the ways that you've done that in your work. So I hope listeners kind of can get that feel of like, oh, okay, whatever I'm going through is okay. Like nothing lasts forever. This will change. Um, so yeah, I guess that's what I'm taking away. So hopefully other people are too. And I guess my call to action is I would love people to check out our website, our team. We've got our clinical group at attached.therapy.com. And I have a section around discernment counseling for couples who are on the brink at relationshipindecision.com. So got lots of fun stuff on there. Lots and lots of resources and a really cool team that we're shaping up. So
Thanks for sharing.
And I think one of the last questions I'm gonna ask you, because you answered what I was going to ask you next. So I wanted to add to that last piece. How many days a week? What hours of the day do you do? Say you to you and your agency, you and your organization. How many days a week? What's y'all's hours? Things like that.
yeah, so we are actually primarily a virtual practice with each of us have an office that we kind of do a hybrid mix with. So I have one in Jersey, we have one in Manhattan, and then one in Stony Brook, New York. So we work kind of all hours. Everyone has a different schedule, which is what I really love about this model. I've been doing virtual work since 2017. So it's been my jam, mainly because I had kids and I wanted to be able to spend time with them while they were here. So it also works really well for clients because like Paula has kids too. So she does things a little bit later in the evening because her kids are a little bit older. I do things earlier in the day because my kids are a little bit younger. Andrew sees people kind of all over the place. Some of us do weekends, some of us don't. So we don't have set hours because we don't have a set building that has to open and close at a certain time.
Okay.
So it makes it really flexible. That's kind of the goal for our practice is to be able to be accessible to different people and really lean into each therapist having their own voice. The through line is attachment, but everyone works with that differently. And so it's what I really, really like about the practice.
Licensing, can you see might seem like a dumb question, but can you see somebody from a different state because you are virtual and what have you?
Yeah, so there's a lot of legalities with our clinical site. It's all New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut. So I
Okay.
finally got
Yeah.
all three states. Very excited
Okay.
about that.
Cool.
Very long process. But relationship and decision, I do more coaching and consultation. So that can be a little bit different.
Okay.
And I can do that across state lines. But our clinical group is just in those three states.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing. I do appreciate it.
We
Yeah, thank you
appreciate
so
you
much for
coming on. I
having me.
learned a lot. And that's why I do this podcast, just to absorb knowledge and learn and hopefully use that knowledge in my everyday.
Imagine a day where fatigue doesn't stand a chance, where clarity perks up your focus as the clock ticks on. Discover W Energy, the drink that transforms ordinary moments into opportunities. With no sugar and flavors that feel like gourmet art, each sip stirs your senses, readying you for greatness. W Energy is a focus energy drink that contains no sugar and is available in a variety of unique flavors. Their coffee fruit cherry extract is the star of the show. This ingredient is what makes W unique and helps to provide smooth and effective focus and energy, making it perfect for anyone who needs to conquer a task. W flavors are created with one goal in mind: to taste unlike any other beverage. We combine bold and unique flavor combinations to craft an experience for your tongue with each sip. W achieves its smooth, effective focus with a high-end tasting experience while using no sugar, no fillers, and no artificial color or dyes. Every product they create follows the same philosophy: be effective, be clean, and taste as good as nature will allow. Use promo code ONEMOMENT to enjoy 10% off their products. And most importantly, they sponsor the One Moment podcast. They are helping to raise awareness of mental health, substance use, suicide, and much more around the world, seeking to make a global impact, reducing stigmas and changing lives one moment at a time. Visit onemoment.chain.box to learn more about our podcast. Follow us on our social media channels for more information and to stay up to date with our episodes.
In the heart of the city, a vision was born, not just a piece of clothing, but a movement. Vital Apparel reflects not just the raw edge of the streets, but the spirit of innovation to bring about change in mental health worldwide. It's more than a style, it's a statement, a blend of comfort with an attitude made for those who refuse to be average. Embrace the culture, ignite your passion, and wear the revolution. Discover your new favorite piece today and be part of something larger than life. Visit our link now at vtlapparel.com to grab your next outfit. Use promo code ONEMOMENT to get 15% off your order. Why support us? The founders of Vital Apparel, Hung Dao and Alex Kozub, sought out to raise awareness, seeking to change the stigma around mental health. 5% of their profits are donated to Brain Research Foundation, furthering the research in mental health. Vital Apparel sponsors the One Moment podcast. We partnered with one another so that together we can make a global impact on mental health, substance use, and suicide, saving lives one moment at a time around the world. Help us break the stigma. Visit onemoment.chain.box to learn more about our podcast and to connect with us on social media. Don't forget to subscribe to our channels to stay up to date on our episodes. Subscribe now. Some photos in this ad were created by Grok.